The October wind whistled through the pine trees as she drove down the narrow dirt road, her hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter with each turn. It had been 6 months since her grandfather passed away, and this was her first time visiting the old mountain cabin he'd left her. Work had kept her busy in the city, but she finally had a weekend free to see what she'd inherited. The cabin sat exactly where she remembered it from childhood. Visits tucked away between tall pine trees, with its weathered wooden walls and stone chimney reaching toward the gray sky. She parked her small car next to the old oak tree and stepped out, breathing in the crisp mountain air. Everything looked the same as when she was 8 years old, running around these woods during summer vacations, but something felt different. Today, something was off. She grabbed her overnight bag from the back seat and walked toward the front porch. The wooden steps creaked under her feet, just like they always had. Her grandfather used to say those creaky steps were better than any doorbell. But as she got closer to the front door, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. The door was open, not wide open, just slightly ajar. Like someone had closed it, but hadn't pushed it all the way shut. She stopped walking and stared at the door. Her grandfather had always been careful about locking up. Even when they were just going for a short walk in the woods, he would always check the door twice. There was no way he would have left it unlocked, and she was certain the lawyer had said everything was secure when he handed over the keys. Maybe the caretaker had been here recently. Maybe the old wood had warped over the winter. She tried to think of logical explanations as she climbed the last 2 steps onto the porch. The wooden boards groaned under her weight, and she paused at the door. Fishing for her keys in her jacket pocket, that's when she heard it. At first she thought it was just the wind moving through the trees. The mountains were always full of sounds, branches rustling, leaves falling, small animals scurrying around. But this sound was different. The sound was rhythmic, steady, human. Someone was breathing inside the cabin. She froze completely, her keys halfway out of her pocket. The breathing was slow and deep, like someone who was resting, or maybe even sleeping. She held her own breath and listened more carefully. There it was again, in and out, definitely coming from inside. Her heart started beating faster. She looked around the empty woods, suddenly feeling very alone. The nearest neighbor was at least 3 miles away. She hadn't passed another car on the mountain road for the last 20 minutes. Her phone was in her bag, but she already knew there was no signal up here. Her grandfather had always joked that the cabin was where people went to escape the modern world. Right now, being cut off from everything didn't feel like a joke. She took a small step back from the door, her mind racing. Who could be in there? A homeless person looking for shelter, someone who had broken in. Her imagination started running wild, and none of the scenarios she pictured were good ones. The breathing continued, undisturbed and steady. Whoever was inside had no idea they had been discovered. They felt safe enough to rest, maybe even sleep, in what they thought was an empty cabin. She thought about getting back in her car and driving to town. She could find help there. Maybe call the police from the general store. But that would take at least an hour, and by the time she got back, whoever was inside could be gone. Or worse, they might see her leaving and know that their hiding spot had been discovered. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. When you're scared, run away from the problem. Face it head on, but be smart about it. She pulled her phone out of her bag anyway, hoping for even 1 bar of signal. Nothing. The screen showed those familiar words. No service. She was truly on her own. The breathing from inside the cabin continued calm and regular. It didn't sound like someone who was awake and alert. It sounded like someone who was genuinely resting, maybe even sick or exhausted. She stood there on the porch for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes, trying to decide what to do. Every option seemed risky. Stay and confront whoever was inside? Leave and potentially let them escape? Try to peek through a window first. The afternoon sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, and she knew that mountain darkness came quickly in October. Whatever she was going to do, she needed to do it soon. She couldn't stand on this porch all day. She definitely didn't want to be dealing with this situation after dark. Taking a deep breath, she made her decision. She would announce herself and see what happened. If the person inside meant harm, they probably wouldn't be sleeping so peacefully. And if they were just someone who needed help, well, maybe she could figure out how to help them. She cleared her throat and spoke toward the slightly open door, trying to keep her voice steady and strong. "Hello, I know someone's in there. The owner of this cabin." The breathing stopped instantly. The silence that followed was somehow more frightening than the sound had been. She waited, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it could be heard from inside the cabin. Then, after what felt like forever, a voice responded from within. It was a man's voice, tired and rough, but surprisingly gentle. "I'm not going to hurt you. I know I shouldn't be here." Just like that, her quiet weekend in the mountains became something completely different. The man's voice hung in the air between them, separated only by the thin wooden door and a few feet of space. She stood frozen on the porch, her mind trying to process what she had just heard. The voice didn't sound threatening, but that didn't make her feel any safer. Anyone could sound calm and gentle when they wanted to. "Who are you?" she called back, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. "What are you doing in my grandfather's cabin?" There was a long pause. She could hear movement inside, the sound of someone shifting around, maybe sitting up or getting to their feet. The old wooden floors creaked, just like they always had, but now each sound made her jump. "My name is ... The voice started, then stopped. "Look, I know this is scary for you. I know you probably want to call the police or run away, but I need you to know that I'm not dangerous. I'm just someone who needed a place to stay." She pulled her phone out again, even though she knew it was useless. Still no signal. The screen felt cold in her shaking hands. She was completely cut off from the outside world, standing alone on a mountain porch with a stranger inside her family's cabin. "How long have you been here?" she asked, taking a small step closer to the door. She needed to know more before she could decide what to do. "A while," came the honest answer. "Longer than I should have been."
Ow.
"I know your grandfather passed away. I saw it in the newspaper. I was planning to leave before anyone came up here." The mention of her grandfather caught her off guard. How did this person know about him? Had they known each other? Or had this stranger just been watching the cabin, waiting for the right time to break in? "Did you know my grandfather?" she asked, her curiosity starting to override her fear. Another long pause. When the voice came back, it sounded different, sadder, maybe even a little ashamed. Yes, I did know him. He was ... He was a good man. A really good man." She didn't know what to make of that. If this person had known her grandfather, why were they hiding in his cabin? Why hadn't they come to the funeral? Nothing about this situation made sense. The afternoon sun was getting lower. Shadows were starting to stretch across the porch. She realized she was getting cold, but she didn't want to go back to her car. She needed answers, and she felt like she was finally getting somewhere. "If you knew him, then you know he wouldn't want someone hiding in his cabin," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Actually," the voice said quietly, "he would understand. Your grandfather was the kind of person who helped people when they needed it most, even when nobody else would." Something in the way he said it made her believe him. There was real respect there, real sadness. This wasn't someone who had just broken into a random cabin. This was someone who had genuinely cared about her grandfather. "You hurt?" She found herself asking, "Are you sick?" "I'm okay," he replied, but she could hear in his voice that he probably wasn't completely okay. "I've been better, but I'm not dying or anything. I just... I lost my job a while back, and then I lost my apartment, and your grandfather. He helped me when I had nowhere else to go." The pieces started falling into place. Her grandfather had always been generous, sometimes too generous. Her grandmother used to tease him about bringing home stray cats and helping neighbors with their problems. It wouldn't be completely out of character for him to help someone who was going through hard times. But why hadn't he told anyone in the S? "Family? Why keep it a secret? He never mentioned you?" she said, not trying to be mean, just stating a fact he wouldn't have. That's the kind of man he was. Didn't help people so he could brag about it later. He just helped because it was the right thing to do. She found herself nodding, even though he couldn't see her. That did sound like her grandfather. He'd always been quiet about his good deeds, preferring to let his actions speak for themselves. "So, what happens now?" she asked. "I mean, I can't just pretend I don't know you're here." "I know. I've been trying to figure that out myself. I was hoping to be gone before anyone showed up, but I got sick last week, and I haven't been able to travel. I know you probably want me to leave right now, and I will. I just need a day or two to get my strength back." She looked around the empty woods again. Even if she wanted to make him leave immediately, how would she do that? She couldn't physically force him out, and she couldn't call for help. But more importantly, did she even want to force him out? If her grandfather had been helping this person, maybe there was a good reason. "What's your name?" she asked. "Your real name? Does it matter? I'll be gone soon anyway. It matters to me. If you knew my grandfather, if he was helping you, then I want to know who you are." There was another long pause. She could hear him moving around inside, maybe pacing or just thinking about what to say. "I worked with your grandfather," he finally said. "Years ago at the Forestry Service, we were friends. Good friends. When everything fell apart for me, he was the only one who didn't turn his back on me. That changed everything. This wasn't just some random stranger. This was someone who had worked with her grandfather, someone who had been part of his life, someone who had known him in ways that maybe even she hadn't. "Will you come out here?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. "I think we need to talk face to face." The silence stretched on for so long that she wondered if he had heard her. Then, slowly, she heard footsteps approaching the door. The footsteps stopped just on the other side of the door. She could hear him breathing again, but this time it sounded nervous, uncertain. She realized her own breathing had gotten faster too. Everything was about to change. In a few seconds, this mysterious voice would become a real person. "I'm going to open the door slowly," he said through the wood. "I don't want to scare you any more than I already have." She took a step back, giving herself space to run if she needed to. Her car keys were still in her hand, and she had a clear path to her vehicle. But something told her she wouldn't need to run. Something in his voice, and the way he talked about her grandfather, made her believe he was telling the truth. The door opened slowly, just a crack at first, then wider.
Ow!
And then she saw him. He was probably in his 50s, with gray hair that looked like it hadn't been cut in months. His clothes were clean but worn, the kind of clothes someone wears when they're being careful to make everything last as long as possible. His face was thin, like he hadn't been eating enough. And there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well either. But what struck her most was how ordinary he looked. This wasn't the dangerous stranger her imagination had created. This was just a tired man who looked like he had been through a lot of hard times. "Hi," he said quietly, staying in the doorway. "I'm sorry we had to meet like this." She studied his face, looking for any sign of danger or deception. Instead, she saw something that reminded her of her grandfather, a kind of quiet dignity, even in difficult circumstances. "You really worked with my grandfather?" she asked. For 12 years, he nodded. "We started the same week back in 1998. He taught me everything I know about forest management. We became good friends." Actually, there was something in the way he said it that made her believe him. You can't fake that kind of genuine sadness when talking about someone you've lost. "What happened to you?" she asked, not trying to be rude, just trying to understand. He looked down at his feet, clearly embarrassed. "Budget cuts. The Forestry Service let a lot of people go 3 years ago. I was one of them. I tried to find other work, but I'm not young anymore, and jobs like that don't grow on trees." No pun intended. She almost smiled at that. It sounded like something her grandfather would have said. "I managed to keep my apartment for about a year," he continued. "But unemployment benefits don't last forever, and I couldn't find anything that paid enough. I ended up losing everything. Your grandfather found out what was happening and offered to help by letting you stay here. At first, he just brought me food sometimes, helped me pay for gas so I could keep looking for work. But when I got evicted from my apartment, he gave me a key to this place, said it was just sitting empty most of the time anyway, and that I could stay here as long as I needed to." She looked past him into the cabin. From what she could see, everything looked clean and organized. There's no sign of damage or neglect. If anything, the place looked better than she remembered it. "How long have you been living here?" "About 2 years," he said, looking ashamed. "I kept thinking I'd find work and get back on my feet, but it's been harder than I expected. Your grandfather never made me feel bad about it, though. He said the cabin needed someone to look after it anyway." She stepped a little closer, curiosity overcoming her fear. "What do you mean, look after it?" "Well, places like this, if you leave them empty for too long, they start to fall apart. Pipes freeze in winter, roof starts leaking, animals get inside. I've been maintaining everything, fixing problems before they get worse. It's the least I could do. Can you show me?" He looked surprised. "You want to come inside?" "I think so. If my grandfather trusted you, maybe I should too." Stepped aside, holding the door open for her. Walked past him into the cabin. And immediately she could smell the familiar scent of pine wood and old books that she remembered from childhood. But there was something else too. The smell of recent cooking, of someone actually living here. The main room looked exactly as she remembered, except cleaner. The old stone fireplace, the comfortable chairs, the bookshelves full of her grandfather's, nature guides and classic novels, but there were also signs of current life. A coffee mug on the table, blanket folded neatly on the couch, boots lined up carefully by the door. "I've been sleeping on the couch," he said quickly. "I didn't. Want to use your grandfather's bedroom?" That felt like too much. She nodded, understanding. Even she felt nervous about the idea of sleeping in her grandfather's room. "You said you've been fixing things? Let me show you." He led her to the kitchen, where she immediately noticed that the old faucet that used to drip constantly was now working perfectly. "I replaced the washers in here and I fixed that loose cabinet door that used to fall open all the time." She remembered that cabinet door. It had been broken for years, but her grandfather had never gotten around to fixing it. "What about the roof? It used to leak in the back bedroom. Fixed that too. There were some loose shingles, and the flashing around the chimney needed to be replaced. I did it myself. I learned a lot about home repair when I was trying to save money on my old apartment." As he showed her around, pointing out various repairs and improvements, she began to see the cabin through different eyes. This wasn't just someone who had been taking advantage of her grandfather's generosity. This was someone who had been genuinely taking care of the place, treating it with respect and gratitude. "My grandfather never mentioned any of this," she said. "He wouldn't have. He always said that helping people wasn't something you did to get credit. It was just something you did because it was right." She found herself nodding again. That was definitely something her grandfather would have said. "So, what happens now?" she asked, echoing her earlier question. "I mean, I appreciate everything you've done for this place, but I don't know what to do with this situation." He was quiet for a moment, looking around the cabin like he was trying to memorize it. "I understand if you want me to leave," he said. "Finally, this is your place now, and I'm basically a stranger to you. I can be packed and gone by tomorrow if that's what you want." But as she looked around the well-maintained cabin, and at this man who had clearly been honoring her grandfather's memory through his actions, she realized that maybe she didn't want him to leave. Maybe there was another solution that would work for both of them. She stood in the middle of the cabin, looking around at everything he had shown her. The repairs, the cleanliness, the obvious care that had gone into maintaining this place. It was all so different from what she had expected when she first heard that breathing through the door. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "This is all happening so fast." "Of course," he replied, nodding. "I know it's a lot to process. Would you like me to go for a walk or something? Give you some space to think?" She shook her head. "Oh, that's okay. Actually, I'm getting hungry and it's going to be dark soon. Do you have any food here?" He looked a little embarrassed. "I do, but it's not much. Just some canned goods and basic supplies. I try to keep a low profile when I go into town for groceries. What do you have?" He walked over to the small pantry and opened it. Inside she could see neat rows of canned soup, beans, pasta, and other simple foods. Everything was organized and clean, just like the rest of the cabin. "I could make some soup," he offered. "And I have bread that's still good. That sounds perfect." As he started preparing the food, she sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where she used to eat breakfast with her grandfather during those summer visits. It felt strange to be here with someone else, but not necessarily bad strange, just different. Tell me more about working with my grandfather, she said, watching him move around the kitchen with obvious familiarity. What do you want to know? Anything. Everything. I only saw him a few times a year, and we mostly talked about family stuff. I don't know much about his work life. He smiled for the first time since she'd met him. Your grandfather was the best ranger I ever worked with. He knew these mountains like they were his own backyard. He could track animals, predict weather changes, spot forest fires before anyone else even smelled smoke, really? Oh yeah. And he was always teaching people. Not just the newer rangers like me, but kids from schools, camping groups, anyone who wanted to learn about nature. He had this way of making everything interesting. She found herself smiling too. That sounds like him. He used to take me on walks when I was little and point out different birds and plants. I thought he was the smartest person in the world. He was pretty smart. But more than that, he was kind. There were guys at work who would make fun of him sometimes because he was always helping people. They'd say he was too soft, too generous. But your grandfather didn't care what they thought. The soup was starting to smell good, and the cabin was getting warmer as the sun set outside. She realized she was feeling more comfortable than she had all day. Is that why he helped you? Because he was generous? Partly, he said, stirring the soup. I think it was also because he understood what it felt like to struggle. Your grandfather grew up poor, you know? His family didn't have much when he was a kid. She didn't know that. Her grandfather had never talked about his childhood, and she had never thought to ask. He told me once that he remembered what it was like to wonder where your next meal was coming from. He said that when you've been hungry, you never forget what that feels like, and you never want to see someone else go through it. I had no idea. He didn't talk about it much. But when he saw what was happening to me, he couldn't just stand by and watch. That's the kind of man he was. We served the soup in 2 bowls and sat down across from her. It was simple food, but it tasted good, and she was hungrier than she had realized. What was he like at work? She asked between spoonfuls. Funny. Always cracking jokes, even when things were serious. He had this way of making everyone feel better, even during the worst days. And he was brave, too. I saw him run toward forest fires that other people were running away from.
That sounds scary.
It was. But he always said that protecting the forest was worth the risk. He loved these mountains more than anything. Well, almost anything. He talked about you all the time. She looked up from her soup, surprised. He did. Constantly. So proud of you. Always bragging about your job in the city, your apartment, your independence. He used to say you were the smartest person in the family and that you were going to do great things with your life. She felt tears starting to form in her eyes. I wish I had visited him more. I was always so busy with work, and the drive up here seemed so long. He understood. He knew you had your own life to live. But he never stopped hoping you'd come back to the mountains someday. He always said this place was in your blood, just like it was in his. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the forest was settling into evening quiet, with just the occasional sound of wind through the trees. Can I ask you something? She said. Finally, sure. Are you really okay, health-wise, I mean? You said you were sick last week? He nodded. Just a cold that turned into something worse. I'm better now, but it knocked me down for a few days. That's why I wasn't able to leave before you got here. Do you have anywhere to go? I mean, if you did leave here, where would you go? He was quiet for a long moment. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. There's a shelter in town, but it's only for short-term stays. Maybe I could find a job somewhere. Start over again. I'm not ready to give up yet, she could hear in his voice. That he was trying to sound more optimistic than he actually felt. The truth was, starting over at his age, with no address and no recent work history, would be almost impossible. What if you didn't have to leave? She heard herself saying. He looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? I mean, what if there was a way for you to stay here? Officially, I mean? Not hiding? I don't understand. She wasn't sure she understood either, but an idea was forming in her mind. It's an idea that might solve both of their problems. This place is too much for me to handle from the city. I need someone to take care of it. someone who knows what they're doing, and you need a place to live. Maybe we could work something out. He stared at her like she had just suggested something impossible. Are you serious? I think so. I mean, I need to think about it more, but yeah, I think I might be serious. For the first time since she'd met him, she saw hope in his eyes. That night, she lay awake in her grandfather's old bedroom, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar sounds of the mountain cabin. The wind in the trees, the settling of old wood, and yes, the quiet breathing of someone sleeping in the living room. But this time, the sound didn't scare her. Instead, it was almost comforting, knowing she wasn't alone in this remote place. She had insisted on taking the bedroom, even though he had offered to sleep outside or in his car. They had agreed that he would stay on the couch, just like he had been doing for the past 2 years. It felt like the right thing to do, but she still couldn't quite believe how much her life had changed in just one day. This morning, she had been a city woman coming to check out an inherited cabin. Tonight, she was seriously considering offering a home to a man she had never met before today. It should have felt crazy, but somehow it didn't. Maybe it was all the stories he had told about her grandfather. Maybe it was seeing how well he had taken care of the place. Or maybe it was just that gut feeling that told her he was a good person, who had hit some bad luck. She thought about her grandfather and wondered what he would say about this situation. Actually, she didn't have to wonder. She knew exactly what he would say. Trust your instincts, kiddo. I'll never steer you wrong. When morning came, she found him already awake, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise. Through the trees. He looked better in the morning light, less tired and worried than he had the day before. Good morning, she said, joining him on the porch. How did you sleep? Better than I have in weeks, he admitted. I think it's because I don't have to worry about hiding anymore. It's exhausting, always looking over your shoulder. She understood that. She couldn't imagine what it would be like to live in constant fear of being discovered. I've been thinking about what we talked about last night, she said, accepting the cup of coffee he offered her. And I want to make you an offer. A real offer. He set down his coffee cup and looked at her seriously. I'm listening. I want you to stay here as the official caretaker of this property. Not hiding, not secretly, officially. I'll pay you a small salary, and you can live here year-round. In exchange, you maintain the cabin, keep an eye on things, and handle any problems that come up. He was quiet for so long that she started to worry he was going to say no. Are you sure about this? He asked finally. You barely know me? I know enough. I know my grandfather trusted you, and that means a lot to me. I know you've been taking better care of this place than anyone else could, and I know you need help. And I need help. It seems like we could help each other. What about your family? Won't they think it's strange that you're letting a stranger live in your grandfather's cabin? She had thought about that too. My family lives scattered all over the country. Most of them never even knew this cabin existed. And the ones who did know about it never bothered to visit my grandfather when he was alive. I don't think they get to have opinions about what I do with it now. What about you? This place belongs to you now. Don't you want to use it yourself? I do want to use it. It's part of the plan. I'm thinking about spending weekends here, maybe longer visits during vacations. Having you here would actually make that easier, not harder. I wouldn't have to worry about pipes freezing in winter, or the roof leaking, or any of the 100 other things that can go wrong with a place like this. He was nodding slowly, like he was starting to believe this might actually work. I have some conditions, she continued. First, you have to let me help you find some part-time work in town. Maybe with the forestry service again, or with the park system. Something that uses your skills and gives you some income beyond what I can pay you. I'd like that, he said. I miss working in the forests. Second, we need to make this legal. An official proper paperwork, everything above board. I don't want you to ever have to hide again, okay? And third, you have to promise me that if this arrangement doesn't work out for any reason, you'll tell me honestly. I don't want you staying here if you're not happy, just because you feel like you have no other choice. I promise. She extended her hand to him. Partners. He shook her hand, and she could see tears in his eyes. Partners. Over the next few months, their arrangement worked better than either of them had expected. He did find part-time work with the local park service, where his experience and knowledge made him valuable, despite his time away from the field. She started coming to the cabin almost every weekend, sometimes bringing work with her and staying for longer periods. The cabin became a retreat for both of them in different ways. For him, it was stability and dignity after years of uncertainty. For her, it was a connection to her grandfather and to a simpler way of life that she hadn't realized she was missing. He taught her things her grandfather had never had time to show her: how to identify animal tracks, how to predict weather, from cloud patterns, how to maintain the cabin's various systems. She helped him navigate the modern world of online job applications and digital communication, skills that had become essential during his time away from regular employment. They developed an easy apprentice friendship based on mutual respect and shared love for the mountain cabin. He would have dinner ready when she arrived on Friday evenings, and she would bring supplies and groceries from the city. They would spend evenings on the porch, sharing stories and enjoying the peaceful mountain nights. One evening, about 6 months after their first meeting, she was sitting on the porch reading when she heard that familiar sound: steady, peaceful breathing from inside the cabin. But this time, instead of fear, she felt grateful. Grateful for the unexpected friendship, grateful for the way things had worked out, and grateful that her grandfather's cabin was once again filled with life and laughter. The sound of breathing that had once terrified her had become the sound of home. Not just for her, but for someone who had needed a home more than she had ever realized. Our grandfather would have been proud of the way things turned out. After all, helping people when they needed it most was exactly the kind of thing he would have done. And sometimes the best solutions to life's problems come from the most unexpected places, even from the sound of a stranger breathing in what was supposed to be an empty cabin.